You asked for it. Now it's here. The truth will be known. She is a grassroots political activist, an author and columnist for Rense.com. She is a federal whistleblower and has been a guest on over 2,500 radio shows. Now she has her own show, sponsored by PatriotFood.com and broadcasting from Big Spring, Texas. This is the Devvy Kid Show.
This is Devvy. Welcome to the show tonight. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule because we have a wonderful guest tonight, a woman that I respect and admire so much. You can read my columns on my website at Devvy.com, and the broadcasts are archived, so just click on the box about the radio show. It tells you how you can do it with your BlackBerry, your Blueberries, your iPods, and all the modern technology that there is. It's Friday night. I usually announce how many banks have been seized by the FDIC. I think this is only the second time this year so far they're not showing anything. Of course, last Friday night they had 8 banks seized, so I hope that that's good news and they're not doing late posting. Our guest tonight is Dr. Judith Reisman. It would take an hour to give you her full bio, so I'm going to condense it just a little bit, but she is very highly sought as a speaker worldwide. She lectures, testifies. She's written many books. She is a consultant and former president of the Institute for Media Education, the scientific advisor for the California Protective Parents Association. She was the principal investigator and author of the U.S. Department of Justice Juvenile Justice Study, Images of Children, Crime and Violence in Playboy, Penthouse, and Hustler, Kinsey, Sex and Fraud, and Soft Porn Plays Hardball, Partner Solicitation Language as a Reflection of Male Sexual Orientation, and Kinsey, Crimes and Consequences, which I have right in front of me, that shocked me to no end. She also writes wonderful columns for WorldNet Daily. She's been a consultant to 4 U.S. Department of Justice administrations, the Department of Education, as well as U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and it goes on and on and on. And I'm so honored to have you tonight, Dr. Reisman.
Well, thank you so much, Devvy. I've appreciated your work. I have certainly tried to follow it and always been impressed with your breadth and wisdom, and yet you're so young.
Well, I really do appreciate those words because I do have the highest regard for you, and you are a tireless warrior for a subject that a lot of people don't want to look at. Like I said, when I read your book, when it first came out, Kinsey, Crimes and Consequences, I was so in shock because when I ran for Congress, I had teachers come up to me, females, and tell me how embarrassed they were by the quote, sex education that they were being forced to teach or lose their jobs.
Yeah.
And when they described to me what was going on in the classrooms, it sickened me.
Yeah, I've had the same thing, obviously. And for me, you know, I mean, I remember I was doing drug-free school program for when it was, I guess it was, no, it wasn't President Reagan. It was President Bush. Well, anyway. I'll never forget one teacher, after a lecture of mine, just broke out in tears, saying that she had always thought that what she was teaching was doing harm. But she was told that that was just her. Another teacher showed me one of the books that she was using where she had stapled together several of the pages because they were so obscene. She felt that she just couldn't refer to those pages when she was talking with the kids. No, this has been a terrible assault on the schools, both broadside by people who really chose to assault the children and choose right now to assault our children, and also the innocent teaching population that's been forced into that same role.
Well, I guess we need to start at the beginning because, like I said, when I read your book, it was more, and I'm an old-timer. I didn't think that too many things could shock me anymore, but when I read about Alfred Kinsey, and especially the fact that the Kinsey Institute is on the University of Indiana, is that right?
Yes, Indiana, University of Indiana campus.
So why
and
don't
they're
you go
still
ahead
federally funded and tax funded by federal and state taxes, and they get grants and so forth. Yeah.
Well, I guess if you can start and tell us about who he was and what he did. It's horrible. If you have young kids in the room, you probably should have them removed.
Yeah, if they're very young. But quite honestly, at this point, if they're teenagers at all, they've seen more than this. And my, the 6th grade, they were getting the kind of sex education that you wouldn't want to even talk about on the radio. So, yeah, Dr. Alfred Kinsey is referred to as the father of the sexual revolution. 1948, just a few years, 2 years and a half, really, after World War II had been officially ended, 1945. Well, in 1948, 3 years, our guys were just struggling home, trying to build their lives again, trying to find their wives, their children, trying to repair their farms. And these were the men who believed in the Judeo-Christian belief system. They were religious men, for the most part, and women who engaged in sex once they were married, that they pretty much did not believe in sex before marriage. They believed in fidelity within marriage and protection of children as asexual beings that deserved adult protection. Homosexuality was considered to be something that was problematic, that it suggested somebody had had a really bad experience as a kid, had been neglected by their father, certainly, and their mother, perhaps. All these ideas, and abortion, of course, was not even heard of because it was quite illegal and abhorrent to most Americans in every way, shape, and form. Rape had stringent rules. In 1948, seduction was against the law in most of our states. In California, seduction was a felony. You couldn't whisper sweet nothings into a girl's ear and then make off with her virginity. That was just not to be done. The rape laws, well, we had capital punishment for rape in half the states. Not that they, employed that all the time, but that was the concept, the ideal, capital punishment. And most of the rest of the states except one, offered life imprisonment if it wasn't capital punishment. Same thing with statutory rape. So as you can see, 1948, when Kinsey hit with sexual behavior in the human male, it was called a K-bomb. In fact, this was a very different society, and Kinsey's mission, and he said so, was to overturn the Judeo-Christian belief system because it was repressing people's sexual conduct, and he believed that that was the cause of his own sexual pathologies. He was a psychopath, a sexual psychopath. He was a sex addict. He was a pedophile. I can say that he fit the profile absolutely. He did employ pedophiles to rape hundreds and hundreds of children, the youngest 2 months of age. And he was then and is now the foundation of all human sexuality education, except strict abstinence, in all our schools from kindergarten through to PhD graduate level. The man changed our laws. He changed our attitudes. He lied and slandered the greatest generation that had just won the war for us and given us freedom. And he did that based upon the fact that he himself was a brilliant sexual psychopath who gathered around him men who shared his bed as well as his pathologies. I think that's a sort of brief introduction.
Well, in your book, and it's fully documented, that there was sexual abuse of at least 317 infants and young boys was a, quote, scientific protocol for Dr. Kinsey's 1948 report. While
yes,
all
indeed.
This was going on, like you said, it's, I was born in 1949, and I guarantee you my parents, if they knew any of that, they would have been absolutely horrified. And
yes. If the public had known, Devvy, what was really going on, in 1954, there was a congressional investigation. The Rense Committee attempted to investigate the funding of the Rockefeller Foundation and Ford and a few of the others. And they investigated these philanthropic organizations because they concluded that these organizations actually were working to destroy American society. And the one area that Rockefeller had funded, and had funded massively, it was their biggest funding recipient, was Kinsey, and that one area was the only research that the Reese Committee was not permitted to look at. The Kinsey data were removed from the file and locked up.
Hang on, we'll get right back on the other side of the break. I hate to interrupt you, but these are hard breaks. We'll be right back. Dr. Reisman, before we went to the break, the music, I couldn't quite hear. Would you, for me, could you just repeat what you said about the hiding the findings of the investigation? I didn't quite get that part.
You mean with the Reese Committee?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. There was a major congressional hearing. In 1954, Congressman Reese attempted to investigate the Rockefeller Foundation funding and Ford funding and some of the other key philanthropies. The congressional findings specifically said that these organizations were attempting to destroy the American way of life. That was a formal official finding. But the one area of funding that Rockefeller had engaged in, the most expensive funding, was to Alfred Kinsey. That research, Kinsey's research, was locked up in a vault, and it was not permitted to be examined by our own Congressional Investigation Committee. Now, the point of that exercise is to say that the Rockefeller Foundation had been funding research that they knew full well, and so, of course, did many other people, certainly the people at Indiana U, was fraudulent, was designed to destroy the sexual behavior patterns that were common to American belief system, that Kinsey was in charge of that children were being tortured for this so-called viable sex research, and had the public, as you said about your parents, had the public known in 1954 that at minimum 317 infants and children, the youngest 2 months of age, were being used in these torture experiments conducted by pedophiles for this group of sexual psychopaths, this nation would have been very different.
Oh, I can imagine. I want to ask you, because I did not know that, what do you think, have you ever filed a Freedom of Information Act request to try to get it?
Yeah, I have several times. I just get sort of vague nothing. Either there's no reply. I've had a lot of problems with getting answers from Freedom of Information. It's a long story, and it's probably good for another book. But my last book, Sexual Sabotage, the one that's just out now, goes into great detail about the sexual sabotage of the greatest generation, how indeed this me generation evolved. No other book in existence that I know of, none, identifies so clearly, follows the dots so clearly, as does this information from the greatest generation to the me generation, sex and drugs and rock and roll. These, American children didn't all wake up one Saturday morning and say, oh gosh, let's just dump our parents' religious beliefs and moral beliefs. Let's just ignore what we've been taught in church and in the synagogue. Let's just ignore what the schools have been teaching us about hygiene, and let's all do sex and drugs.